Hi, good day to everyone. We are a student from Rizal Technological University, currently taking a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering, and we are here today to present the National Fire Protection and Association. We came up with the motto of this is more about engineering, but more likely ensuring safety, because we will tackle about NFPA codes, standards, and recommended practices and guides. So I think the first reporter would tackle about more safety. And right now, I am passing the mic to Angel Hachuela, who will present the first chapter of this NFPA code.
So, good day everyone. I'm Angel Hachuela and I am the first reporter and I'll be discussing about chapter 1 which is safety related practices. The first article in chapter 1 is article 100, the definitions. Okay. This article contains only those definitions essential to the proper application of this standard. It is not intended to include commonly defined general terms or commonly defined technical terms from related codes and standards. So in general, only those terms that are used in two or more articles are defined in Article 100. Other definitions are included in the article in which they are used but may have reference in article. The definitions in this article shall apply wherever the terms are used throughout the standard. The first definition is arc flash hazard, a source of possible injury or damage to health associated with the release of energy caused by an electric arc. So, the likelihood of occurrence of an arc flash incident increase when energized electrical conductors or circuit parts are exposed or when they are within equipment in a guarded or enclosed condition, provided a person is interacting with the equipment in such a manner that could cause an electrical arc. An arc flash incident is not likely to occur under normal operating conditions when enclosed, energized equipment has been properly installed and maintained. Number two is arc flash suit. So, a complete arc-rated clothing and equipment system that covers the entire body except for the hands and feet. So here are the example of um, arc flash suit. Ito yung example niya. So, arc flash suit may include pants or overalls, a jacket, or a coverall, and beekeeper type hood fitted with a face shield. Arc rating. Next slide. Okay, arc rating, the value attributed to materials that describes their performance to exposure to an electrical arc discharge. So dito, the arc rating is expressed in calories cm squared and is derived from the determined value of arc thermal performance or energy break open threshold. So an arc rated clothing or equipment indicates that it has been tested for exposure to an electrical arc. Flame-resistant clothing without an arc rating has not been tested for exposure to an electrical arc. So, all arc-rated clothing is also flame resistant. American Society for Testing Materials is an organization that defines and sets standards for a variety of products, materials, systems, and services used by people performing their jobs every day. So the ATBP measured in calories cm squared, and it is defined as the maximum incident heat energy that a fabric can absorb and lessen the injury to a second degree burn. So calorie cm is a unit we use to measure this incident energy. You may also hear this energy measured in joules, but calories cm squared is more common. The next definition is authority having jurisdiction, an organization, office, or individual responsible for enforcing the requirements of a code or a standard or for approving equipment, materials, an installation, or a procedure. So the phrase authority having jurisdiction or its acronym AHJ is used in NFPA documents in broad manner since jurisdictions and approval agency vary as do their responsibilities. So yung meaning ng jurisdiction, the official power to make legal decisions and judgment. Alam naman natin na public safety is primary, so yung mga authority that have jurisdiction may be federal, state, local, or other regional department, or individuals such as fire chief, fire marshal chief, or fire prevention bureau, labor department or health department official, electrical inspector, or others having statutory authority. The next one is balaclava. So, an rated head protective fabric that protects the neck and head except for a small portion of the facial area.
Pa-alarm. Pakumanta ka na lang.
Yung example ng balaclava is ito. Ito yung example niya. Next slide. Next is electrically safe work condition, a state in which an electrical conductor or circuit part has been disconnected from energized parts, lock tag in accordance with established standards, tested to verify the absence of voltage, and if necessary, temporarily grounded for personal protection. So, an electrically safe work condition is not a procedure. It is a state wherein all hazardous electrical conductors or circuit parts to which a worker might be exposed are maintained in an energized state for the purpose of temporarily eliminating electrical hazards for the period of time for which the state is maintained. The next is fuse, an overcurrent protective device with circuit opening fusible part that is heated and severed by the passage of overcurrent through it. Alam naman natin kung ano yung itsura ng fuse. So, yung fuse is comprises all the parts that form a unit capable of performing the prescribed functions. It may or may not be completed device necessary to connect it to an electrical circuit. Next slide. Next is interrupt rating. The highest current at rated voltage that a device is identified to interrupt under standard test conditions. So, for clarification, it is known as breaking capacity or short circuit rating. The interrupting rating is maximum approved current which the fuse can safely interrupt at rated voltage. Equipment intended to interrupt current at other than fault levels may have its interrupting rating implied in other ratings such as horsepower or lap rotor current. For example, when the circuit breaker can be used at more than one voltage, the interrupting rating for each level is labeled on the circuit breaker. Next, overcurrent, any current in excess of the rated current of equipment or the ampacity of a conductor, it may result from overload, short circuit, or ground fault. So, a current in excess of rating may be accommodated by certain equipment and conductors for a given set of conditions. Therefore, the rules of overcurrent protection are specific for particular situations. Next is premises wiring system, interior and exterior wiring, including power, lighting, control, and signal circuit wiring together with all their associated hardware, settings, and wiring devices, both permanently and temporarily installed. So this includes a wiring from the service point or power source to the outlets, or wiring from and including the power source to the outlets where the service point. Yung mga wirings na yun is hindi included yung wiring internal sa mga appliances, luminaires, motor, controllers, motor control centers, and similar equipment. Pero yung mga power sources included but are not limited to interconnected or stand-alone batteries, solar photovoltaic system, and distributed generation systems or generators. Next. Next is receptacle, a contact device installed at the outlet for the connection of an attachment plug or the direct connection of electrical utilization equipment designed to mate with a corresponding contact device. So for receptacles, we have single receptacle that is contact device with no other contact device on the same yoke. There are also multiple receptacle with two or more contact device on the same yoke. So, ito yung example. Ito yung multiple receptacle. Tapos ito yung single receptacle. So ito yung tinatawag na yoke yung nasa taas. For a clear explanation about that, a single receptacle, also called a single outlet or a single electrical socket, is one which receives only one electrical plug. So it differs from a standard residential receptacle which usually has room for two plugs. Next is service point, the point of connection between the facilities of the serving utility and the premises wiring. So the service point can be described as the point of demarcation between where the serving utility ends and the premises wiring begins. The serving utility generally specifies the location of the service point based on the conditions of service. So yung meaning ng demarcation is the marking of the limits or boundaries of something. Next is switchgear, metal, and close. A switchgear assembly completely enclosed on all sides and topped with sheet metal. This assembly may include control and auxiliary devices. Access to the interior of the enclosure is provided by doors, removable covers, or both. Metal enclosed switchgear is available in non-arc resistance or arc resistance construction. So, meron din tayo tinatawag na switchgear metal clad. Assembly completely enclosed on all sides and topped with sheet metal having draw-out switching and interrupting devices and all lead parts enclosed within grounded metal compartments. Ito naman yung itsura ng switchgear. Ayan yung example ng metal enclosed switchgear. Tapos, ito yung example ng metal clad switchgear. So, what sets metal clad apart from metal enclosed is that all of the internal components are also individually clad in metal or compartmentalized. Each of these components may also be insulated, as in the case of bus bars and grounded individually, and the different compartments can be removed individually as well with a minimal effect on the overall system. Next slide. The next definition is next slide. And working on energized electrical conductors or circuit parts. Intentionally coming in contact with energized electrical conductors or circuit parts with the hands, feet, or other body parts with tools, probes, or with test equipment regardless of the personal protective equipment a person is wearing. So there are two categories of working on. Diagnostic testing is taking readings or measurements of electrical equipment, conductors, or circuit parts with approved test equipment that does not require making any physical change to their electrical equipment, conductors, or circuit parts. The next example is repair is any physical alteration of electrical equipment, conductors, or circuit parts, such as making or tightening connections, removing or replacing components. Let's proceed with the next article. Article 105, Application of Safety-Related Work Practices and Procedures. Next. Okay. Article 105.1, Scope. Chapter 1 covers electrical safety-related work practices and procedures for employees who are exposed to an electrical hazard in workplaces covered in the scope of this standard. Purpose: these practices and procedures are intended to provide for employee safety relative to electrical hazards in the workplace. Next. So let's proceed with the Article 105.3, which is responsibility. There are two types here. The first one is employer responsibility. So the employer shall have the following responsibilities. Number one is to establish, document, and implement the safety-related work practices and procedures required by these standards. Number two is provide employees with training in the employer safety-related work practices and procedures. Second is employee responsibility. Yung responsibility naman ng isang employee is to comply with the safety-related work practices and procedures provided by the employer. Article 105.5, the organization. Chapter 1 of this standard is divided into 5 articles. Yung nakasaad naman sa article na to is kung ano yung mga nilalaman ng Chapter 1 na divided into 5 articles, which is Article 100 provides definitions for term use in one or more of the chapters of this document. Article 105 provides for application of safety-related work practices and procedure. Article 110 provides general requirements for electrical safety-related work practices and procedure. And Article 120 provides requirements for establishing an electrically safe work condition. Lastly is the Article 130 provides requirements for involving electrical hazards. So moving on the next article, which I'll be discussed, is Article 110. It is the general requirements for electrical safety-related work practices. Next. Okay. Priority. Hazard elimination shall be the first priority in the implementation of safety-related work practices. So, yung hazard elimination is the risk control method listed first in the hierarchy of risk control. An electrically safe work condition is a state wherein all hazardous electrical conductors or circuit parts to which a worker might be exposed are placed and maintained in an energized state for the purpose of temporarily eliminating electrical hazards. So in general, electrical conductors and circuit parts shall not be considered to be in electrically safe work condition until all of the requirements of Article 120 have been met. So, yung lahat ng safe work practices na applicable sa circuit voltage and energy level ay ginagamit lamang in accordance with Article 110 and Article 130 until such time that electrical conductors and circuit parts are in an electrically safe work condition. Article 110.3, electrically safe work condition. So, yung lahat ng energized electrical conductors and circuit parts operating at voltages equal to or greater than 50 volts ay kailangan ilagay into an electrically safe work condition before an employee performs work if any of the following condition exists. So, yung mga following conditions na to ay yung number 1 is the employee is within the limited approach boundary. Number 2 is the employee interacts with equipment where conductors or circuit parts are not exposed but an increased likelihood of injury from an exposure to an arc flash hazard exists. Next slide. Energized work. Letter A is additional hazards or increased risk. Energized work shall be permitted where the employer can demonstrate that the energizing introduces additional hazard or increased risk. The energized means disconnect an electrical circuit from a power supply. Examples of additional hazards or increased risk include but are not limited to interruption of all life support equipment, the activation of emergency alarm systems, and shutdown of hazardous location ventilation equipment. Letter B is infeasibility. Energized work shall be permitted where the employer can demonstrate that the task to be performed is infeasible in the energized state due to equipment design or operational limitations. So, yung mga examples of work na might be performed within the limited approach boundary of unexposed energized electrical conductors or circuit parts, like startup or troubleshooting of electric circuits that can be only be performed with the circuit energized, and work on circuits that form an integral part of a continuous process that would otherwise need to be completely shut down in order to permit work on one circuit or piece of equipment. Letter C is equipment operating at less than 50 volts. So, lahat ng energized electrical conductors and circuit parts na nag-ooperate at less than 50 volts ay hindi required na i-de-energize where the capacity of the source and any overcurrent protection between the energy source and the worker are considered, and it's determined that there will be no increased exposure to electrical burns or to explosion due to electrical arcs. Next slide. So, letter D is in normal operating condition of electric equipment, it shall be permitted where a normal operating condition exists. So, paano nga ba natin malalaman if normal condition exists? So, a normal operating condition exists when all of the following conditions are satisfied. Number 1 is the equipment is properly installed. Number 2, the equipment is properly maintained. Number 3, the equipment is used in accordance with the instructions included in the listing and labeling and in accordance with manufacturer's instructions. Number 4, equipment doors are closed and secured. 5, all equipment covers are in place and secured. Number 6 is there is no evidence of impending failure. So, to clarify all the conditions I've mentioned, the phrase properly installed means that the equipment is installed in accordance with applicable industry codes and standards and the manufacturer's recommendation. When we say properly maintained means that the equipment has been maintained in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations and applicable industry codes and standards, and the phrase evidence of impending failure means that there is evidence such as arcing, overheating, loose or bound equipment parts, visible damage, or deterioration. Next. Article 110.5, Electrical Safety Program. So, in general, the employer shall implement and document an overall electrical safety program that directs activity appropriate to the risks associated with the electrical hazard. So, here in general, safety-related work practices such as verification of proper maintenance and installation, alerting techniques, auditing requirements, and training requirements provided in this standard are administrative controls and part of an overall electrical safety program. Letter B, inspection. Sa inspection naman, the safety program shall include elements to verify that newly installed or modified electrical equipment or systems have been inspected to comply with applicable installation codes and standards prior to being placed into service. Letter D is awareness and self-discipline. The electrical safety program shall be designed to provide an awareness of the potential electrical hazards to employees who work in an environment with the presence of electrical hazards. So here, the program shall be developed to provide the required self-discipline for all employees who must perform work that may involve electrical hazards. The program shall instill safety principles and controls. Next slide, please. Electrical safety program. Letter is electrical safety program principles. So the electrical safety program shall identify the principles upon which it is based. Here are some few examples. Number 1 is inspecting and evaluating the electrical equipment. Number 2, maintaining the electrical equipment insulation and enclosure integrity. Number 3, planning every job and document first time procedures. Letter F is electrical safety program controls. So an electrical safety program shall identify the controls by which it is measured and monitored. So here's some example of program control. Number tasks to be performed within the limited approach boundary or arc flash boundary of exposed energized electrical conductors and circuit parts are to be identified and categorized. Next is precautions appropriate to the working environment are to be determined and taken. Next is a logical approach is to be used to determine the associated risk of each task. Next is electrical safety program procedures. So in electrical safety program procedures, an electrical safety is identify the procedures to be utilized before work is started by employees exposed to an electrical hazard. For an example of a typical electrical safety program procedures, number 1 is the purpose of task. Number 2 is the qualifications and number of employees to be involved. Number 3, identification of hazards and assessment of risk of the task. Next is letter H is the risk assessment procedure. The electrical safety program shall include a risk assessment procedure and shall comply with Article 110.5. So, the risk assessment procedure shall address employee exposure to electrical hazards and shall identify the process to be used before work is started to carry out the following. So, ito yung number 1 is the identify hazards. Number 2 is assess risk. 3 is implement risk control according to the hierarchy of risk control methods. Next. Number 2 is human error. So, in human error, the risk assessment procedure shall address the potential for human error and its negative consequences on people, processes, the work environment, and equipment relative to the electrical hazards in the workplace. Number 3 is the hierarchy of risk control methods. The risk assessment procedure shall require that the preventive and protective risk control methods may be implemented in accordance with the following hierarchy. So, number 1 is elimination. Next is substitution. Next is engineering controls, awareness, administrative controls, and PPE. So just to inform, elimination, substitution, and engineering controls are the most effective methods to reduce risk as they are usually applied at the source of possible injury or damage to health, and they are less likely to be affected by human error. And the awareness, administrative controls, and PPE are least effective methods to reduce risk as they are not applied at the source and they are more likely to be affected by human error. Next. So, letter I is job safety planning and job briefing. So, before starting each job that involves exposure to electrical hazards, the employee in charge shall complete a job safety plan and conduct a job briefing with the employees involved. Yung number 1 is job safety planning. So, in job safety plan, shall be in accordance with the following. Ito yung be completed by a qualified person. Number 2 is be documented. Number 3, include the following information. So, ito yung a description of the job and the individual task. Letter B is identification of the electrical hazards associated with each task. Next, number 2 is job briefing. So, the job briefing shall cover the job safety plan and the information on the energized electrical work permit is a permit is required. So, number 3 is change in scope. Additional job safety planning and job briefing shall be held if changes occur during the course of the work that might affect the safety of the employees. Next. So, letter J, incident investigations. The electrical safety program shall include elements to investigate electrical incidents. Electrical incidents include events or occurrences that result in or could have resulted in a fatality, an injury, or damage to health. Incidents that do not result in fatal, injury, or damage to health are commonly referred as the close call or near miss. K is electrically safe work condition policy. An electrical safety program shall include an electrical safe work condition policy that complies with Article 110.3. Next is lockout tag-out program. So here, the electrical safety program shall include the information required by the one of the following: lockout tag-out program in accordance with Article 120.1. Letter A is a reference to the employer's lockout tag-out program established in accordance with Article 120.1. Next. Letter M is auditing. So, in auditing, there are 3 types. First is electrical safety program audit. So, the electrical safety program shall be audited to verify that the principles and procedures of the electrical safety program are in compliance with this standard. Audits shall be performed at intervals not to exceed 3 years. Number 2 is field work audit. Field work shall be audited to verify that the requirements contained in the procedures of the electrical safety program are being followed. So when the auditing determines that the principle and procedures of the electrical safety program are not being followed, the appropriate revisions to the training program or revisions to the procedure shall be made. Audits shall be performed at intervals not to exceed 1 year. Number 3 is lockout tagout program and procedure audit. The audit shall be designed to identify and correct deficiencies in the following. So, the lockout tagout program are required by Article 120 shall be audited by a qualified person at intervals not to exceed 1 year. The audit shall cover at least one lockout tagout in progress. The audit shall be designed to identify and correct deficiencies in the following. So, number 1 is the lockout tagout program and procedure. Number 2, lockout tagout training. Number 3 is worker execution of the lockout tagout procedure. Next. Article 110.6, training requirements. So, in training requirements, ito yung mga nakapaloob sa kanya. Letter A, electrical safety training. So, the training requirements contained in Article 110.6 shall apply to employees exposed to an electrical hazard when the risk associated with that hazard is not reduced to a safe level by applicable electrical installation requirements. Such employees shall be trained to understand the specific hazard associated with the electrical energy. They shall be trained in safety-related work practices and procedure requirements as necessary to provide protection from the electrical hazards associated with the respective job or task assignments. So, lahat ng employees ay dapat ma-train to identify and understand the relationship between electrical hazards and possible injury. So, pasok dito yung qualified person. A qualified person shall be trained and knowledgeable in the construction and operating of equipment or a specific work method and be trained to identify and avoid the electrical hazards that may be present with respect to that equipment or work method. Sa unqualified persons naman, they shall be trained in and be familiar with any electrical safety related practices necessary for their safety. So, next is the lockout tagout procedure training. Lahat ng employees na involved sa lockout tagout procedure required by Article 120.2 shall be trained in the following. Ito yung number 1 is initial training. Number 2 is retraining. Number 3 is lockout tagout training documentation. Letter C is emergency response training. So, in emergency response training, we have the following. Number 1, contact release. Employees exposed to shock hazards and those responsible for the safe release of victims from the contact with energized electrical conductors or circuit parts shall be trained in methods of safe release. Refresher training shall occur annually. Number 2 is first aid, emergency response, and resuscitation. Yung nakapaloob dito is letter is employees responsible for responding to medical emergency shall be trained in first aid and emergency procedure. Next is employees responsible for responding to medical emergency shall be trained in cardiopulmonary resuscitation or CPR. Letter C is employees responsible for responding to medical emergency shall be trained in the use of an automated external defibrillator or AED if an employer's emergency response plan includes the use of this device. So next is training shall occur at a frequency that satisfies the requirements of the certifying body. So we should note that employees responsible for Responding to a medical emergency might not be first responder or medical professionals, such as employees could be a second person, a safety watch, or a crafts person. Number three is the training verification. Employees shall verify at least annually that employee training acquired by Article 110.6 is current. Next. Article 110, host and contract employer's responsibility. So, nakapaloob dyan is the host employer shall inform contract employers of the following. So, number one is the known hazards that are covered by these standards. Number two is the host employer shall report observed contract employer related violation of this standard to the contract employer. Number two is contract employer responsibility. So, responsibility ng contract employer na i-ensure that each of his or employees is instructed in the hazard communicated to the contract employer by the host employer. This instruction shall be in addition to the basic training required by these standards. Number two is the contract employer shall ensure that each of his or her employees follows the work practices required by these standards and safety-related work rules required by the host employer. Letter C is the documentation, where the host employer has knowledge of hazard covered by this standard that are related to the contract employer works. There shall be a documented meeting between the host employer and the contract employer. So, Article 110.8, test instruments and equipment. Yung nakapaloob dyan is letter A, testing. Only qualified person shall perform tasks such as testing, troubleshooting, and voltage measuring on electrical equipment where an electrical hazard exists. Letter B is the rating. So, test instruments, equipment, and their accessories shall be as follows: rated for circuits and equipment where they are utilized. Number two, approve the purpose. Next is used in accordance with any instructions provided by the manufacturer. Letter C, the design. Test instruments, equipments, and their accessories shall be designed for the environment to which they will be exposed and for the manner in which they will be utilized. Letter D is the visual inspection and repair. So here is test instrument and equipment and all associated test leads, cable, power cords, probes, and connectors shall be visually inspected for external defects and damage before its use. So if there any defect or evidence of damage that might expose an employee to injury, the defective or damaged item shall be removed from the service. No employee shall use it until a person is qualified to perform the repairs and tests that are necessary to render the equipment safe has done. Letter E is the operation verification. When the test instruments are used for testing the absence of voltage on conductors or circuit parts operating at voltages equals to or greater than 50 volts, that the operation of the test instrument shall be verified on any known voltage source before and after an absence of voltage test is performed. So that's all for Article 110.8. And next one is portable cord and plug connected electric equipment. So this section applies to the use of cord and plug connected connected equipment, including cord and plug connected test instruments and cord sets, extension cords. So, number one is the handling and storage. So, portable equipment shall be handled in and stored in a manner that will not cause damage. Flexible electric cords connected to the equipment shall not be used for raising or lowering the equipment. Flexible cords shall not be fastened with staples or hung in such a fashion as could damage the outer jacket or insulation. Letter B is the grounding type equipment. So here an flexible cord used with grounding type utilization equipment shall contain an equipment grounding conductor. Attachment plugs and receptacles shall not be connected or altered in a manner that would interrupt continuity of the following equipment grounding conductor. Additionally, these devices shall not be altered in order to allow use in manner that was not intended by the manufacturer. So, the adapters that interrupt the continuity of the equipment grounding conductor shall not be used. Letter C is visual inspection and repair of portable cord and plug connected equipment and flexible cord sets. Yung nakapaloob dyan is the frequency of inspection. So, before each use, portable cord and plug connected equipment shall be visually inspected for external defects such as loose parts or deformed and missing pins, and for evidence of possible internal damage such as pinch or crush outer jacket. Letter B is the defective equipment. If there is a defect or evidence of damage that might expose an employee to injury, the defective or damaged item shall be removed from service. No employee shall use it until a person is qualified to perform the repairs and tests necessary to render the equipment safe as done. Letter C is the proper mating. When an attachment plug is to be connected to a receptacle, the relationship of the plug and receptacle contact shall first be checked to ensure that they are of mating configurations. Letter E is the connecting attachment plugs. So, dito, employees' hands shall not be wet when plugging and unplugging flexible cords and cord plug connected equipment if energized equipment is involved. So, energized plug and receptacle connection shall be handled only with insulating protected equipment if the condition of the connection could provide a conductive path to the employer's hand. Example is if a cord connector is wet from being immersed in water. Letter C is the locking type connector shall be secured after connection. So next one is the manufacturer's instruction. So portable equipment shall be used in accordance with the manufacturer's instruction and safety warnings. Next. Article 110.10 Ground Fault Circuit Interrupter Protection or GFCI. In general, employees shall be provided with ground fault circuit interrupter protection where required by applicable state, federal, or local codes and standards. Letter B is maintenance and constructions. GFCI protection shall be provided where an employee is operating or using cord sets or extension cords or cord and plug connected tools related to maintenance and construction activities supplied. Letter C is outdoors. GFCI protection shall be provided when an employee is outdoors and operating or using cord sets or cord and unplugged connected equipment supplied. Letter D is test ground fault circuit interrupter protection devices. So, Article 110.11 overcurrent protection modification. So, overcurrent protection of circuits and conductors shall not be modified even on a temporary basis beyond what is permitted by applicable portions of electrical codes and standards dealing with overcurrent protection. Article 110.12, the last one is equipment use. So equipment shall be used in accordance with the manufacturer instructions. Let's proceed with Article 120, establishing electrical safety work condition. So, in general, the lockout-tagout program and the procedure shall also incorporate the following. So, each employer shall establish, document, and implement a lockout-tagout program. The lockout-tagout program shall specify lockout-tagout procedures to safeguard workers from exposure to electrical hazards. So, ito yung mga procedures be applicable to the experience and training of the workers and conditions in the workplace. Number 2 is meet the requirements of Article 120. Number 3 is apply to fix permanently installed equipment, temporarily installed equipment, and portable equipment. Next slide. So, employer responsibility. The employer shall be responsible for the following. Number 1 is providing the equipment necessary to execute lockout-tagout procedure. Number 2, providing lockout-tagout training to workers in accordance with Article 110.6. Number 3 is auditing the lockout-tagout program in accordance with Article 110.5. Number 4 is auditing execution of the lockout-tagout procedures in accordance with Article 110.5. Next. So, lockout-tagout principles. So, employee involvement. Each person who could be exposed directly or indirectly to a source of electrical energy shall be involved in the lockout-tagout procedure. So, an example of direct exposure is the qualified electrician who works on the motor starter control, the power circuits, or the motor. An example of indirect exposure is the person who works on the coupling between the motor and compressor. Letter B, lockout-tagout procedure. A lockout-tagout procedure shall be developed on the basis of the existing electrical equipment and system shall use suitable documentation including up-to-date drawings and diagrams. So, the procedure shall meet the requirements of the applicable code standards and regulations for lockout and tagging of electrical sources. Letter C is the control energy. All sources of electrical energy shall be controlled in such a way as to minimize employee exposure to electrical hazards. Letter D is electrical circuit interlocks. So, In letter D, documentation including up-to-date drawings and diagrams shall be reviewed to ensure that no electrical circuit interlock operation can result in re-energizing the circuit being worked on. Letter E is control devices. Lock tags shall be installed only on circuit. Disconnecting means control devices such as push buttons or select switches shall not be used as the primary isolating device. Letter F is the identification. The lockout tagout device shall be unique and readily identifiable as a lockout tagout device. Next. Article 100. So, lockout application. Energy isolation devices for machinery or equipment installed after January 2, 1990 shall be capable of accepting lockout device. Letter B is lockout tagout device. Each employer shall supply and employees shall use lockout tagout devices and equipment necessary to execute the requirements. So locks and tags used for control of exposure to electrical hazards shall be unique, shall be readily identifiable as lockout tagout devices, and shall be used for no other purpose. Next. So, Article 120.4 lockout tagout procedure. The employer shall maintain a copy of the procedures required by this section and shall make the procedure available to all employees. So, letter A is the planning. So, in planning, the procedure shall require planning including the requirements. Number 1 is the locating sources. Up-to-date single-line drawings shall be considered a primary reference source for such as information. When up-to-date drawings are not available, the employer shall be responsible for ensuring that an equally effective means of locating all sources of energy is employed. Number 2 is exposed persons. The plan shall identify persons who might be exposed to an electrical hazard and the PPE required during the execution of the job or task. Number 3 is the person in charge. The plan shall identify the person in charge and his or her responsibility in the lockout tagout. Number 4 is simple lockout tagout procedure. All lockout tagout procedures that involve only a qualified person. So, de-energizing one set of conductors or circuit part source for the sole purpose of safeguarding employees from exposure to electrical hazards shall be considered to be a simple lockout tagout. So, simple lockout tagout procedure shall not be required to be written for each application. Each worker shall be responsible for his or her own lockout tagout. Next. Article 120.5 process for establishing and verifying an electrically safe work condition. So, establishing and verifying an electrically safe work condition shall include all of the following steps which shall be performed in the order presented if feasible. So, ito yun. Number 1, determine all the possible sources of electrical supply to the specific equipment, check applicable up-to-date drawings, diagrams, and identification tags. Number two, wherever possible, visually verify that all blades of the disconnecting devices are fully open or that draw-out type circuit breakers are withdrawn to the test or fully disconnected position. Next. Number three is apply lockout tagout devices in accordance with the documented and established procedure. Number four, use an adequately rated portable test instrument to test each phase conductor or circuit part to test for the absence of voltage. Next. So number five, so where the possibility of induced voltages or stored electrical energy exists, ground all circuit conductors and circuit parts before touching them, where it could be reasonably anticipated that the conductors or circuit parts being de-energized could contact other exposed energized conductors or circuit parts, apply temporary protective grounding equipment in accordance with the following. So, letter A is the placement. Placement is temporary protective grounding equipment shall be placed at such locations and arranged in such a manner as to prevent each employee from being exposed to a shock hazard. The location, sizing, and application of temporary protective grounding equipment shall be identified as part of the employer's job planning. Letter B is the capacity is temporary protective grounding equipment shall be capable of conducting the maximum fault current that could flow at the point of grounding the time necessary to clear the fault. Last is the impedance. Temporary protective grounding equipment and connections shall have impedance low enough to cause immediate operation of protective devices in case of unintentional energizing of the electric conductors or circuit. So, I think that's all for Article 120. Let's proceed to Article 130. Will be discussed by the next reporter.
Hi, good day. I hope you're still listening to us. Here's the Article 130. It's all about working involving electrical hazards. Can you please, next slide. In the Article 30, this covers the requirements for work involving electrical hazards, such as the electrical safety-related work practice assessments, precautions, and procedures when an electrical safety work conditions cannot be established. This would recognize when energized electrical conductors and some circuit parts operating at voltages equals to 2 or greater than 50 volts are not put into an electrical safety work condition and work is performed. And this would perform as permitted in accordance with the first reporter said in the Article 110.4, and all the following requirements shall apply when only qualified person shall be permitted to work on electrical conductors or maybe circuit parts that have not been put into an electrical safety work condition. And the second one is unenergized electrical work permit shall be completed as required by 100, Article 130.2. And the third one would be a shock assessment shall be performed as required by Article 130.4. And the last one is an arc slash risk assessment shall be performed as required by 130.5. Next slide. So in Article 130.2, this nakapaloob dito when work is performed as permitted in accordance with 110.4. An energized electrical work permit shall be required and documented under any of the following conditions. Number one would be when work is performed within the restricted approach. And the second one would be when the employee interacts with the equipment when conductors or secret parts are not exposed but an increased likelihood of injury from an exposure to an arc slash hazard exit. Next slide. And in Article 130.4, it's shock risk assessment. And this would tackle about the occurrence of injury or damage to health and the potential severity of injury or damage to health shall take into consideration of your employer. And the number one would be to identify shock hazards. So, kailangan sa Article 130, sinasabi sa Article 130.4, kailangan natin i-identify yung mga shock hazards, mga power outlets, mga electrolytic cells, mga ganun. The second one is to estimate the likelihood of occurrence of injury or damage to health and the potential severity of injury or damage to health. So, kailangan yung arc slash, ma-assess niya yung work, yung isang worker, dapat ma-assess niya yung, kung ano man yung nakapaloob dito sa article na to para makapag-work siya ng maayos. And para yung health niya is good. The worker should know this basic standard. So number 3, to determine if the additional protective measurements are required, including the use of PPE. So PPE is really important for us, especially with our electrical engineering. For the sake of our safety, there should be a standard that we will follow in this article, since shock risk assessment, it would tell us to lessen the hazards. We cannot prevent the dangerous hazards, but we are here to lessen it. So there's a standard. There is a standard in 70E, National NFPA 70E for that. And then next slide. Article 130.5. Oh, wait lang. Yung Article 130.5, arc slash risk assessment. So, kanina tinakal ng first reporter na si Angel ang arc slash risk assessment. And in this article, we should, sinabi ko nga kanina na dapat i-lessen natin yung hazard. And then we should follow the PPE, protective equipment, na kailangan dapat natin suotin yun to lessen the injury, the damage to our health, for the sake of us din naman yun. Kaya dapat hindi natin kinakalimutan magsuot ng PPE during work especially iingat tayo at madaming pwedeng explosion na nangyari kapag chemicals yung mga hinahawakan natin. It should have a proper handling. In addition to lessen the hazard exposure in our health. So basically, it's really important for us to determine the additional protective measures which is required in this article. So next slide. Article 130.7, personal and other protective equipment. Wait. So lahat ng PPE natin, it should be tested muna ng ating ng supplier. Kailangan muna lahat ng PPE natin under muna ng supplier na itetest muna bago natin suotin. Hindi kasi natin alam if those PPEs safe ba gamitin muna. And in this article, it really tackles that you should double check your personal protective equipment before using it. For the sake of your safety, you have to, from the top and the bottom, the goggles and the shoes that you will use in this while working, I think it should be double check always. It's really important for that para maiwas natin ang sakit. Para kinabukasan makakapasok pa din tayo ng healthy and maganda pa din ang performance natin sa work kapag nagsusot tayo ng PPE. So, employees exposed to electrical hazards when the risk associated with the hazard is not adequately reduced by the applicable electrical installation. Requirements shall be provided with and shall use protective equipment that is designed and constructed for the specific of the body to protect it and for the work to be performed. So yun nga, kailangan nga magsuot palagi tayo ng PPEs to lessen the hazard. Since umawak na tayo ng explosive and especially electrical installations. So next slide.
Okay, next slide is I will be reporting the 138 to 130.12. So the 138 is other precaution for personal activities. Dito naman is sa ating mga sarili naman to. So as a personnel, so yung ibang reporter is sinabi yung mga PPE, mga equipment. Tapos dito naman sa article 130.8 is para sa atin naman. So nakasa dito sa article na to is how to be alert, aware, and safe on a working place. Dapat lahat tayo nakikita natin mga visuals na kung anong mga hazard dapat iniiwasan natin yon. Then pag nagtatrabaho naman tayo sa ating mga workplace, bago tayo pumunta sa workplace natin, dapat wala tayong mga accessories to conduct electricity para sa safety rin natin na sa mga matataas na voltages. So basically, ang minds lang dito sa precautionary for personal activities, always expect that it have electricity. Kahit alam nating naka-unplug na yan, dapat expect na rin natin na may kuryente pa rin yun. So we must de-energize pa rin. Mga extra step para lang alam nating safe tayo and yung iba nating kasamaan. So sa 138.9, work within the limited approach boundary or arc flash boundary of overhead lines. So sinasabi naman dito is dapat ang knowledgeable personnel that knows the overhead electrical lines are insulated for operating voltages. Tapos, sinasabi rin dito is safety for unqualified persons. Dapat yung mga employers at employee are responsible to ensure the workplace is a safe place kahit sa mga unqualified person. Pero mas madalas sa mga unqualified person is medyo distance sila dun sa workplace. And yung mga knowledgeable, yun yung pumapasok dun sa mismong workplace talaga. Then safety for the vehicular and mechanical equipment din to, grounding for the mechanical and vehicular equipments. Then sa 130.10, underground electrical lines and equipment. So minsan pag gumigiba tayo or humuhukay tayo ng mga sa lupa na natin is may mga kuryenteng dumadaloy din sa ilalim ng lupa. So sinasabi dito is before excavation starts, where there exists a reasonable possibility of contacting electrical lines or equipment, the employer shall take necessary steps to contact and appropriate owners and authorities to identify and mark the location of the electrical lines and equipment. So pag tayo dito, pag maghukay tayo ng mga para gumawa or build some buildings, kinokontak natin yung previous owners or authorities to track or mark the possible hazard or possible kung anong pwedeng matama na lines, water lines or electrical lines. So, safe work practices and PP shall be used during the excavation. So, para ma-lessen din yung hazard. Next is 130.11, cutting and drilling. Ito naman is pareho lang din sa 130.10. Pero sabihin nating small scale lang to. But cutting and drilling is pag nagdi-drill ka kahit sa bahay, is dapat alam natin kung saan ba nakalagay yung mga power lines natin, kung ano yung kung nadaanan ba yun ng ating mga power lines para pag drill natin hindi siya mabubutas din makukuryente tayo, parang ganoon na rin. Dapat alam natin kung saan, dapat palagi tayong may plans, titingnan yung plans natin for the electrical. Then so 130.12, cutting, removing and rerouting of conductors. So conductor must be de-energized in order to cut, remove or reroute them. Must take additional steps to verify the conductors are energized. So yun yung sinasabi na dapat palagi nating isipin na energized pa rin yung kahit nakatanggal na yun sa power lines or electrical power na kinakabitan nito, dapat palagi nating inisipin na may kuryente pa rin yun for additional step and lessen the hazard din. Ang pinaka dito is non-contact test instrument is one of way to verify kung wala talagang kuryente ang mga conductor.
So I will next reporter I will discuss chapter 2, the safety related maintenance requirements. Next slide. Introduction. Scope. Chapter 2 address the requirement that follow. 1. Chapter 2 covers practical safety-related maintenance requirements for electrical equipment and installation in workplaces as included in 90.2. These requirements identify only the maintenance directly associated with employee safety. 2, Chapter 2 does not prescribe specific and maintenance method or testing procedure. This left to employer to choose from the various maintenance methods available to satisfy the requirements of Chapter 2. And thus, for the purpose of Chapter 2, maintenance shall be defined as preserving or restoring the condition of electrical equipment, installation of or parts of either for the safety of employees who work were exposed to electrical hazards, repair or replacement of individual portions or parts of equipment shall be permitted without requiring modification or replacement. Other portion parts are in safety condition. So dito po is practical yung na mga kinakailangan ng sa pagpapanatili ng sa kaligtasan para sa mga mga gamit na di kuryente at para sa seguridad ng workplace. Sa chapter 2 is hindi lang sa mga particular na pamaraan or pagpapanatili ng safety. Is para sa mga employee kailangan din na yung pag-iingat ng mga may bagay na may mga kuryente. Next slide. Article 205 General Maintenance Requirements. Next slide. Article 205.1 Qualified persons. Employees who perform maintenance or electrical equipment and installation shall be qualified person as required in Chapter 1 and shall be trained in familiar with the specific maintenance procedures and test required. So dito, yung mga empleyado na may kakayanin yung mga di kuryenteng kagamitan na katulad ng mga installation, dapat is kwalipikado yung tao at sanay sa at familiar sa mga pamaraan. 2.5.2 Integral electrical system shall be maintained in eligible condition. Shall diagram kung saan bahagi siya ng electrical system na dapat yung mapanatiling kondisyon at para sa mga kuryente na hindi magkakaroon ng defect. 205.3 General Maintenance Requirements. Electrical equipment shall be maintained in accordance with manufacturer's instruction or industry consensus standards to reduce the risk associated with failure to the equipment owner or the owner's designated representative shall be responsible for maintenance equipment and documentation. Sa electrical, yung mga kagamitan ay dapat panatilin din sa kondisyon as the industry para maiwasan din yung pwedeng mangyari or risk at yung gumamit ay maaari dapat na responsible para sa panatiling kuryente kagamitan or iwas sa risk. Uh, 205.4 Overcurrent protective devices. Ito naman, ito yung a piece of equipment in electrical system that are risk or experiencing overcurrent due. 205.5 Spaces about electrical equipment. All working space and clearance required by electrical codes and standards shall be maintained. Dito naman yung working space about electrical equipment is sufficient access and working space shall be provided and maintained about all electrical equipment to permit 205.6 grounding and bonding equipment raceway cable tray in enclosure bonding and grounding shall be maintained to in use uh, dito is we must supplement the metal raceway by an internal insulated equipment grounding conductors installed to ground the equipment enclosure. 205.7 guarding of energized conductors and circuit parts. Enclosure shall be maintained to guard against unintentional contact and expose the energized conductors in circuits parts and other electrical hazards. Covers doors shall be in place with associated fasteners and latches secured. Uh, uh, in this location, where electric equipment is likely to be exposed, like physical damage, to be enclosures or guards shall be we arrange in such as to prevent. Next slide. 205.8 safety equipment. Locks, interlocks, and other safety equipment shall be maintained a proper working condition to accomplish the control purpose. So dito, specifically designed to help protect the workers against health or safety risk on the job site. 205.9 pillars, spaces, access to working space, and escape such shall be kept clear and obstructed. Dito yung the importance like the of a clear hallway, stairwell, ramp is not realized until they have been completely inaccessible during an emergency. 205.10 identification of components. Identification of components were required in safety-related instruction. Operating or maintenance. A postage shall be securely attached and maintained in eligible condition. Ito yung dapat yung every component contains specific marking either on the body or stated on the packaging. 205.11 warning signs. Warning signs where required shall be visible, secure, attached, and maintained in legible condition. Dito, yung sign is maybe be required to be posted in the area where pwedeng magkaroon ng potential hazard or is present. Next slide. 205.12 identification of circuits. Circuit or voltage identification shall be securely affixed and maintained in updated and legible condition. So the purpose of this section is electrical identification for electrical equipment, raceways, and conductors. 205.13 single multiple conductors and cables. Electrical cables and single multiple conductors shall be maintained free of damage, shorts, and ground that would expose employees to an electrical hazard. So dito naman is to determine ng various difference in use cases for single strand and multi-stranded wiring in condition can be difficult. 205.13 flexible cords and cables. Flexible cords and cables shall be maintained to preserve insulation integrity, damaged cords and cables. cords and cables shall not have worn, frayed, or damaged areas that expose employees to an electrical hazard. So, dito is to ensure natin that flexible cords and cable are not damaged by sharp or corners doorways. So, isa dito is yung strain relief of cords and cable shall maintain to prevent pull from being transmitted directly to joints of or terminals. Next slide. Article 210, substation switch gear assemblies and switchboards, panel boards, motor control centers, and disconnect switches. Next slides. 210.1, enclosures. Enclosures shall be kept free of material that would expose employees to an electrical hazard. So, dito sa enclosure, like sa mga open area, parang keep natin yung mga material na magkukos ng employees hazard. 210.2, area enclosures. Fences, physical protection, enclosure, or other protective means were required to guard against unauthorized access and unintentional contact with exposed energized conductors and circuit parts shall be maintained. So, yung dito naman, yung authorized lang na need magsuot ng protection like ng PP para maiwasan ma-expose sa hazard na pwedeng mag-case. 210.13, conductors, current carrying conductors, buses, switches, disconnects, joints, and termination. And bracing shall be maintained to perform as follows. 1. Conduct rated current without overheating. And number 2, withstand available fault current. So, dito is yung yung material that, ito yung material na nag-aalos ng current to flow it. So, need natin dito na lagyan siya ng maiwasan natin. So 210.4, insulation integrity. Insulation integrity shall be maintained to support the voltage increase. Dito is para ma-determine natin by the insulation properties of cable where to insulation acts as the barrier between two live wire. 210.5, protective devices. Protective devices shall be maintained to adequately withstand or interrupt available fault current. So dito is it means na yung device is intended to protect dangerous parts. So next slide. Article 215, premises wiring. Next slide. 215.1, covers for wiring system components. Cover for wiring system components shall be in place with all associated hardware, and there shall be no unprotected openings. Dito is like magkaroon ng open wire na need natin mag-ingat at mag-ingat at lagyan natin ng mga electrical wire kapag may open wire para hindi mag-cause ng electrical risk. Next, 215.2, open wiring protection. Open wiring protection such as location or barriers shall be maintained to prevent unintentional contact. So, yun nga yung kanina na like sa mga to ensure na i-check na the components of your like the home's electrical system. 215.3 raceways and cable trays. Raceways and cable trays shall be maintained to provide physical protection and support for conductors. So dito rin is para maprotektahan yung mga wire na nagkaroon ng isang wire na need natin na ma-maintain and to protect yung may yung dangerous parts. 205.4 is overcurrent protective devices. Overcurrent protective devices shall be maintained in accordance with the manufacturer's instruction or industry standards, maintenance, test, and inspection shall be documented. So dito, yung protection devices are meant to protect against the yung possible na dangerous effects of overcurrents such as like the an overload current. Next, 205.5 spaces about electrical equipment. All working space and clearness required by electrical codes and standards shall be maintained. So requires na a clear space at least 3-inch wide and 3 inches deep. And the equipment is likely to be worked on while energized. 205 grounding and banding equipment, raceway in cable tray and enclosure banding and grounding shall be maintained to ensure electrical continuity. So ito yung banding is the like kanina yung this is the connection of non-current carrying conductive elements like enclosure in the structures. And yung in-grounding naman is to this the attached banded system to the earth. 205.7 guarding energized conductors and circuit parts. Enclosure shall be maintained to guard against unintentional contact, expose energized conductors and circuit parts and other electrical hazards. Covers and doors shall be placed in all associate fastener and latches secured. Dito naman to avoid the risk accidental shock like live electrical components operating at 50 volts or must be guarded with covers or other permanent barriers to prevent an accidental like contact by workers in their tools. So 205.8 safety equipment, locks, interlocks, and other safety equipment shall be maintained in proper working condition and to accomplish the to control purpose. Dito is yung paglinis ng mga gamit is to ensure safe operation during maintenance and cleaning. (205.9) clear spaces. Access to working space and escape passage shall be kept clear and obstructed. So dito is para maiwasan ang pwedeng danger na pwedeng mangyari sa workplace. Next. 210 identification components and identification of components were required safety related instruction operating maintenance if postage shall be securely attached and maintained in eligible condition. Mas madali kapag na dito is ma-identify natin ang isang bagay like mga operating system. So warning signs where required shall be visible, required, attached, and maintained in eligible condition. Dito naman is yung mga hazard may mga sign na para maiwasan yung possible na mangyari. 205.12 identification of circuits. Circuit or voltage identification shall be securely affects, maintain, and update eligible condition. Ito, need natin na ma-identify yung isang circuit, all the wall outlets and rooms which lights went out. 205.13 single and multiple conductors and electrical cables in single multiple conductors shall be maintained, raised, damaged, short, and ground that would expose employees to an electrical hazard. So dito naman is generally accepted that armored cable installation are more economical than pipe and wire installation. Next slide. 205.14 flexible cords and cables. So dito is para ma-ensure natin that flexible cords and cables are not damaged by sharp corners or doorways. Yung 1 is damaged cords and cables, and 2 is strain relief. Dito, like electrical cords, cables, wires, and fixes can get damaged over time. Para dito is ma-provide yung protection to the wires and cable by securing the cable of power cord to the panel of the electrical equipment. Next slide. Article 220, controller equipment. To 20.1 scope. Ito yung dito is naman is para maiwasan at makontrol ang pwedeng mangyari sa isang lugar at like sa mga kagamitan. And 20.2 protecting and controls circularly dito is simplest is to intentional addition of a weak link in an electrical circuit. Next. 225.1 fuses shall be maintained free of breaks and cracks in fuse cases, perils, and insulators. Fuse clips shall be maintained to provide adequate contact in fuses. Fuse folder or current limiting fuse shall not be modified to allow the insertion of fuse are not current limiting. Non-current limiting fuse shall not be modified to allow their insertion into current limiting fuses holders. So, ito na is mas kilala natin na this protects the wiring and the appliance of if something goes wrong. At para ma-break yung mga the circuit if fault in appliance when causes too much current to flow. Next slide.
Next slide ako na. Next slide. Sa 225.2 molded cases circuit breaker. Ang nakikita natin is sa molded case circuit breaker, yung mga nasa loob ng circuit breaker natin, yung may mga 15 ampere, 30, 40, 80 to 100 ampere yung mga nakalagay dyan sa, ayun yung sinasabi nating breaker. Tapos, ang sinasabi dito is maintained free of cracks and crack or broken operating handle. So, pag may crack na yan or kahit basag na yung switch niya, na kailangan ng palitan. Then, since ang circuit breaker natin is di madala nating gamitin, minsan na minsan nasira din throughout time. So, paano ba natin to i-maintain? Dapat mini-maintain natin to every 6 months. Mini-maintain natin to through testing lang. Ang pinagtetest natin to is, gagawin natin is, i-switch on and off lang natin to for several times para mag-connect pa din yung yung copper dun sa switch niya, para yung mga build up dust tsaka yung mga foreign objects dyan is mawala din, at para gumalaw-galaw din yung kanyang mga mechanics ng switch and off. Tapos sa 225.3 circuit breaker testing after electrical fault. So, circuit breakers that interrupt faults approaching to interrupting rates shall be inspected. So, ayun nga sinasabi natin, na dapat mini-maintain natin and in-inspect natin yung mga circuit breaker natin. Ang circuit breaker natin is, ang trabaho niyan is to protect expensive equipment from damaging through fault. So, imbis na yung mga equipment, mga highly expensive equipment natin yung masira, is breaker na yung magti-trip para di na siya pumasok doon sa equipment natin na masyadong mahal. So, medyo may pagkamahalan din yung breaker natin ngayon, pero compare naman natin sa equipment, mura na siya doon. Article 230, rotating equipment. So, Article 231, terminal boxes. Yung terminal boxes, yung mga yung mga nilalagyan natin ng mga receptacles, yung circuit breaker, ay yung mga mga example nun. So, ano ba yung trabaho ng terminal boxes? Terminal boxes have para hindi ka makakontak doon sa energize, kasi pag nilagyan natin ng kuryente yung mga wires na nakaloob sa terminal boxes, pwede kang ma-kuryente. So, pini-prevent ni terminal boxes yung mga yung electricity na makalabas doon sa kanya, para maprotektahan tayo sa mga exposed energized conductor. Then, guards, barriers, and access plates. Ayun yung pag sa mga malalaki ng equipment, malaki na yung mga voltage nun, then dapat pag mga matataas na yung voltage, dapat lalagyan natin yun ng mga barriers, para o kaya kahit hindi mga matataas na voltage, may mga umiikot, mga rotating equipment doon, nilalagyan natin yun ng mga guards at saka barriers, para yung personnel natin is hindi siya makapunta doon sa mga energized or mga rotating equipment natin na that would cause death or hazard. Pero smala yung death. So, nilalagyan natin to protect our employee and ourselves from harm and hazard and death of the equipment. So, Article 235, hazards. Maintenance requirement for hazardous classified location. So, maintenance nito is depende siya sa is depende siya sa specific hazard tsaka sa specific location. May mga iba't ibang may mga iba't ibang precautions sa iba't ibang hazard din. Dapat palagi yung ganun. So this special type of equipment and installation to ensure safe performance under condition of proper use and maintenance. So yun yung mga proper criteria and maintenance for the hazardous location. No energized part of exposure. There are no breaks in conduit system, settings, and enclosure from damage, corrosion, and other causes. All bonding jumpers are securely fastened and intact. All fitting boxes and enclosure with bolted cover have all bolts installed and bolted tightened. Tapos ang ginagawa ng mga inspector dito since hazard nga at classified location to, all the maintenance personnel and inspector tsaka yung test, they all exercise more than the ordinary care and or maintenance of these locations. So Article 240, batteries and battery room. Ventilation. Sa mga battery room, naglalagay tayo ng mga ventilation. So preferably natural ventilation system. Ang ginano para to prevent build-up explosion. So naglalagay tayo ng mga ventilation sa mga kasi bawal din sa atin kulob doon. And sa NFPA na nandito ang ventilation. Pero sa atin naman may nakasad naman tong ventilation natin sa ating RA 9514 or the National Fire Code. So nakasad sa section 10.2.7.2 ng National Fire Code. The design and installation of ventilating, air conditioning, and other building services equipment shall be installed in accordance with the Philippine Mechanical Code. So halos magkakasabay din dito yung ating mga Philippine Mechanical Code and mga Philippine Electrical Code. And sinasabi din dito sa ating National Fire Code na where ducting, air conditioning, and ventilating system passes through one room to another shall provide with automatic fire dampers. Yung fire dampers is parang ano siya, heat seeking na magpapalarm yung sinasabi dyan na alarm systems natin para makapag hindi siya pumutok or hindi siya magkaroon ng fire explosion sa ating pinagtatrabahuan. Then sa ating 240.2 eye and body wash apparatus. Ito naman is dapat halos dapat palagi natin itong ginagawa kasi since ginagamit natin to halos araw-araw o frequently natin itong ginagawa, dapat palagi itong maintained and pagkatapos ng trabaho palagi natin itong nililinisan and dapat secure natin to na wala tong mga breakage or cracks na pwedeng makasakit sa atin. So Article 245, maintenance requirement for portable electric tools. So halos na lang to, basahin ko na lang. Attachment plugs, receptacle, cover plates, and cord connector shall be maintained such that the following criteria are met. There are no breaks, damage, or cracks exposing energized conductors and circuit parts. There are no missing cover plates. Termination have no stray strand or loose terminals. There are no missing loose, altered, or damaged blades, pins, and contacts. Polarity is correct. So, Article 250, Personal Safety and Protective Equipment. Sa PPE naman to. Maintenance requirement for personal safety equipment. So halos dito ay dapat ma-maintain natin yung halos lahat na ginagamit natin dito. So yung iba halos alam naman natin. Yung iba lang i-explain ko. Grounding equipment. Ang grounding equipment yung para to sa mga open areas like mga poste ng kuryente. Pag mag-aayos sila doon is naglalagay sila ng grounding equipment doon. Ang grounding equipment doon is cable, then dalawang cable, tapos pupunta siya para siyang style na star connection. Yung nasa baba, yung ilalagay siya sa lupa, ayun yung magiging grounding system niya. Then pwede ka nang mag-ayos doon ng linya ng kuryente. So hot sticks used to detach the fuse to transformer. Yung nakalagay doon sa fuses natin sa 225.1 sa fuse insulators, ayun yung mga nakasabit na fuses natin sa transformers. Ayun yung pinapatay or hinihila para magkaroon ng brownout sa isang lugar, sa isang specific na lugar, para mag-ayos din ng kuryente din doon. Ayun yung pinapatay. So, paano natin yung ipapatay ng mga ganun na halos ganun halos mga nasa 100 volts ang dumadaloy doon. So, ginagamitan natin yun ng hot sticks. Ang hot sticks yung panghila niya doon. Parang specialized na stick din yun para mahila yung fuse natin sa kuryente doon sa transformers. Then, dielectric footwear. Ang dielectric footwear, nasa number 11, is para lang siyang yung mga nakikita natin sa fire department na mga sapatos nilang lalaki. Ganon din yung itsura niya ng dielectric footwear. Ganon yung itsura, pero ang usage niya is for electricity. Kaya niya i-insulate ang mga, for example, like mga matatas na voltages like 250 kilovolts. Ganun ang nakita ko sa internet na kaya niyang i-withstand na kuryente. Kaya niyang i-insulate na kuryente sa atin. Yan lang din. Next. 250.2 Inspection and Testing of Protective Equipment and Protective Tool. So, sasabi naman dito is all equipment specified in 250.1 that so sinasabi dito is in inspection, so visually must be protective inspected for ang primary uses ng is primary protect from shock hazard insulation system to ensure protection of personnel. Shall be verified by an appropriate test and visual inspection to ascertain that insulating capabilities has been retained. So dapat sa mga inspection natin is dapat qualified yung mag-i-inspect, and yung mga testing equipment is dapat qualified din for testing this kind of equipment and protective tools para ma-withstand yung standard na inano ng mga codes natin. Then last, safety grounding system. So sinasabi naman dito is prior to being returned to service, temporary protective grounding equipment that has repaired or modified shall be tested. Temporary protective grounding equipment shall be tested as service condition required. So, safety grounding equipment, halos lahat naman dyan is standard naman and dapat brand new. Pero halos minsan kasi may mga nasira dyan or minomodified nila because of the expensive equipment na hindi kaya ng isang company or industry. Pero lahat naman ng ano dito sinasabi na lahat ng repaired equipment or modified equipment tinetest pa rin siya as same standard sa mga brand new equipment. So all repaired or modified must still uphold the standard of operation. So next tayo sa chapter 3 na tayo. Next reporter will be Judea.
So, the next chapter would be Article 300. This is about safety requirements for special equipment. The next slide. The Article 300 is this covers the special electrical equipment in the workplace and modifies the general requirements of Chapter 1. So lahat ng sinabi kanina ni Angel, magka-connected yung Chapter 1 to Chapter 300. Yun. And then, the Chapter 3 of this standard is divided into several articles na mamaya i-discuss ko. And let's start with the Article 310. Next slide. The Article 310 is about safety-related work practices for electrolytic cells. So, yung electrolytic cells requires proper handling in addition to severe corrosion hazards or explosive fire electrical and toxic hazards, which really needs to have a proper handling in order for us to have a good operation design in the workplace. So ano ba yung example ng electrolytic cells? Yung example nito yung sodium fluoride na forming sodium metal and chlorine dust. Na this is an energy which requires to make the reactions in order to proceed, in order to supply an electrical current. So it's also used in electrofining and electrowinning of several non-ferrous materials, which is this is really high and almost all high purity aluminum, copper, and zinc. And this leads to produce industrial in electrolytic cells na kailangan talaga ng proper handling. So kanina nga sinabi ni Angel na kailangan natin ng safeguarding, which yung personal, this includes the consistent administrative enforcement of safe work practices and also the proper training na kailangan there should be a qualified person and knowledgeable in this operation of cell lines, working zone equipment, and specific work methods na kailangan nilang i-train kasi nga this meron itong high purity ng chemicals na kailangan i-handle ng maayos. So next slide. So in Article 320, in this article, it covers the electrical safety requirements for the practical safeguarding of employees while working with exposed stationary storage batteries that exceed 50 voltage nominal. So, merong required person din dito na authorized personnel na kailangan in charge by handling this kind of premises or other person that should be appointed or selected by the person in charge of the premises who performs certain duties associated with stationary storage batteries. And ano, there should be some warning signs din na kailangan natin malaman para nga in order. So going back, there should be a general safety hazard. Yung energy exposure level shall not exceed those identified in the following list unless appropriate are implemented, especially in alternative current in 50 volts and 5 milliamperes, and in direct currents na 100 volts. This kind of information were provided by DOE, Department of Energy. So they have the standards to have general safety about batteries and battery storage. So and and also there should be in handling such batteries, kailangan din natin ng safety protective equipment like the PPE. Goggles and face shields should be appropriate for electrical hazards and chemical hazards. And gloves and aprons is also an appropriate one for the chemical hazards since battery is a chemical one. And then in handling a battery activities, there's certain activities that do not include handling of electrolytes. So some batteries maintenance activities usually do not involve handling electrolytes. Since batteries that are hermetically sealed or immobilized electrolytes, such as lithium batteries, something like that, and they present little or no electrolyte hazard. So most of modern density meters expose workers to a quantity of electrolytes. So minute to be considered workers to a quantity of electrolyte would not be considered handling electrolyte. So however, if the specific gravity readings are taken using above hydrometers, the risk of exposure is higher. This could be considered to be handling electrolyte and the requirements of Article 320 would be applied. So, next slide. So in Article 330, which is the safety-related work practices, this is all about lasers. This article applies to safety-related work practices for maintaining lasers and their associated equipment, such as laser energy source, laser radiation, laser systems. Especially, tinatakal din dito yung voltage and current and all of the stored energy in our workplace. And ayun nga, kailangan pa din dito ng special training since this is laser has a meron siyang high energy na sometimes we can be electrocuted sa lasers. So there should be a personnel na properly trained na alam kung paano humawak ng laser. So they can be connected sa mga sinabi kanina ni Angel. If ever na napansin nyo yung mga sinasabi niya kanina na about PPEs, arc flash, and something related to OSHA. So next slide. So in Article 340, so in Article 340, this is about safety-related work practices, power electronic equipment. In this article, it shall apply to safety-related work practices around power electronic equipment, which this includes the electric arc welding equipment. Kailangan kapag gumagawa tayo ng electric welding, kailangan may proper PPE. Kailangan may goggles and meron tayo dito suits and boots para maprotektahan ang ating health. And the second one would be high power radio, radar, and television transmitting towers and antennas. The third one would be industrial dielectric and radio frequency induction heaters. The fourth one would be shortwave or RF diathermy devices. Number 5 would be process equipment that includes rectifiers and inverters such as the following, like motor drive, interruptible, power supply system, and lighting control rules. So next slide. In the Article 350, safety naman to about research and development laboratory. So, ayun nga, kailangan yung laboratory, yung space room natin or maybe building, yung workplace natin like building or maybe specific room, kailangan involved dito yung procedures of investigation. Kailangan muna natin i-double check lahat ng rooms natin since we are lessening the hazard while we are working. So it's really important for us to like double check everything after we do our work. So it's really important for us to double check kasi possible kasi na hindi natin ma-avoid ang risk. So kailangan natin hindi natin siya may iwasan, pero we could lessen it. Parang ganun yung sinasabi dito na it's our responsibility to check everything bago tayo gagawa para din kasi sa sarili natin yun at para maganda yung pagiging flow ng ating gawa doon sa workplace kung ano man ang activities na gagawin natin. So next slide. Safety-related requirements for capacitors. In the article 360 discovers the electrical safety-related requirements for the practical safeguarding of employees while working with capacitors that present an electrical hazard. So there's a lot of hazards in capacitors such as arc blast hazards, lead resistors, charge transfers, dielectric absorption, discharge time, and ground sticks. Maybe some hard grounding din. And this kind of hazard should be a lesson. Kailangan natin malaman yung mga hazard na to in order for us to So yun, kailangan nga natin ito para maiwasan nga natin yung danger. Kasi this is, yung like, there is a requirement for safety-related capacitors and kailangan din ng proper training dito like us kasi electrical engineering tayo. This is more about us kasi nga it's a capacitor and hindi naman kasi pwedeng ipahawak natin ang capacitors sa civil engineering. So there should be a proper training for them if ever man nahawak sila ng capacitors. So there should be a qualification and training. So the employees who performs work on electrical equipment with capacitors that exceeded the energy threshold in 360 articles shall be qualified and shall be trained in and familiar with the specific hazards and controls required for safety work. So, meaning they should know how to have a proper handling in capacitors and they should have a familiarization about that, I guess. And while performing the work of something about capacitors, the risk assessment process for capacitor shall follow the overall risk assessment procedure na sinabi ni Angel kanina. So, if additional protective measurements are required, they shall be selected and implemented according to the risks and risk control identified in the article that was said kanina ni Angel. And then papasok na din dito yung arc flash na diniscuss din kanina ni Angel na kailangan ang arc flash nga is hazardous one, and we really need to have a proper training about that and proper familiarization kung ano ba yung ginagawa natin about a certain workplace. So, next slide, please. Ay, ayun na pala. So, I think that's all. Kasi yung Article 300 to 360, this is all just about the safety equipment na kailangan nating tandaan. First of all, it should have always a proper training. There's a standard na kailangan mo na pinuduce ng Department of Energy before you can have before you can handle some capacitors, some lasers, some electronic cells. Sa atin din, as an electrical engineering student, we can have proper training din na requirements in order for us to handle such equipment. And then, I think that's all. Paulit-ulit lang naman kasi yung 310 to 360. It's all about proper training, safeguarding, which related sa tinatakal kanina ni Angel, kaya umabot siya ng 1 hour. And then, yeah, so, meron mo ba kayo sasabihin? Guys, nandito mo ba kayo?
Yes, halos yung sa chapter 2 din, halos paulit-ulit.
Opo.
Personal equipment, how to maintain our personal equipment, and how can we prevent the hazards and harmful of the electricity sa atin. Kaya halos
So, any words, last words, expressions? I think you have something to say. Angel, you have something to say or add? Maybe? So yeah, I guess the one reason that we should take this seriously kasi kailangan talaga natin ng personal protective equipment by handling some other equipments na. So basically, National Fire Protection is all about safety in handling explosives. How can we lessen the risk, the hazard? How can we lessen the hazard? It's all about arc flash na tinakal kanina nung chapter 1. I think that's all. Again, we are the 4th year of electrical engineering department in Rizal Technological University. And I guess that's all. And thank you for listening. If you really listen enough. So, bye-bye.
So thank you everyone for the attention and listening to our presentation.